do you have numbers or reps or timelines established? It takes this many of this exercise to get to this point or this much time, or is it always just straight up individualized?
If you've got a young athlete that's 14 that plays sport, every single athlete should be doing all 5 of those movement patterns in a light tier format. You can go in any sport, in season, off season, 2-day, 3-day, 4-day splits.
It's so simple that way. What exercises can help with which portion of that?
There's a correlation between people that can accelerate well and the people that can broad jump well. Like, everyone should be able to light tier hop. But when you're scaling up to more medium tier stuff, there's a bit of a crossover there.
You mentioned working with the NFL guys that you might see like these specific movements really carry over well to acceleration work. These movements carry over really well to max speed work.
So I look at it in 2 ways. I look at utility of momentum, so utilizing momentum and creating momentum. Creating momentum is an acceleration. Utility of momentum is...
We're going to give you the best approach for jumps training with plyometric expert Matt Watson, and we're going to start right now. Matt Watson's a former high jumper who trains athletes to be as explosive as possible with various forms of plyometrics. Some of the unique stuff that you're going to get. You're going to learn exactly what deep tier plyometrics are. You're going to see how he compartmentalizes and creates the fundamentals around jumps-based training. We even go into talking about Stephen Holm and some of the stuff that he did, but all of this stuff is going to help you in no matter what realm or what sport that you play. So stay tuned and check out what we learn from Matt Watson. Okay, Matt, I want to know, a kid hits you up, athlete hits you up, they're 17 years old. Let's say they play basketball. Let's say they play football. They're a wide receiver. What's one of the, like, how do you set up analyzing their movement and figuring out how you want to get them to the next level? And then what would that look like from like a training split perspective?
I think analytically, or like evaluation wise, the kid walking up to me, like the moment my eyes see who this kid is, you start to analyze. You're like, he's never lifted before, or he is super long in his lower limbs, or he's not, he's 5'8", a real stout guy. That is probably like the best evaluation component. Them walking towards me. I'll never forget hearing my mentor, Eric. We were at Stefan Holm's masterclass that he did in the UK. Him and his dad, who was his coach, they came. It was a couple of years after he retired, and they did a masterclass. And Eric said, look at how Stefan walks in comparison to these jumpers who were maybe 210 to 220 jumpers, so 7 foot to 7'3" or 4. And I was like, you could tell how differently wired he was in the way that he walked. And I just kind of like started to pick on that as I kind of evolved as an athlete and then into being a coach. And you can straight away see how someone moves. So it's like, where do we go from there? And you're like, cool. Well, let's say he's a tall, wiry kid. Let's say he plays in a wide position in football. Like, what is he going to need to do that? And those are the first things that I'll probably test. Let me see how fast you are. Let me see how well you cut. And let me see how well you decelerate. If straight away he shows me that he can't decelerate, he probably shows me that he's not that strong. So it's like, cool, well, I can just do a basic test for him in the weight room and be like, yeah, that confirms that. And so I always tend to go the opposite way. I'm like, well, this kid plays football. He can play football. He can do the things. I'm not scared to test him in things that are dynamic. So I just go to those first. And then it has this trickle down effect and being like, how deep of a lens do I need? Do I need to look at his foot? I'm like, well, that'd probably be the last thing that I look at. You know, maybe there is some dysfunction or asymmetry that's so heavily biased there that it maybe makes a difference. But we start with the super fast, the highly eccentric demanding components, and then trickle that back to just doing some like clinical based movements, like can you squat and hinge? And it tends to be the way that I'll evaluate someone. So they walk in, cool, you're that type of person. Like I walk around my wife all the time now and I'm like, she would be an awesome high jumper. Like she's like this woman's 6'1", she's probably in her mid-30s, got kids. I'm like, she would have been a great high jumper. And like, that's just my bias and my background.
I think that's totally normal though. It's like fun to think through, and like as horrible as projection is, it's fun to project your analysis of what their career would have been. Like that look at the way that person walks right now. Like that's an athlete right there. And they might not even know it.
No, no. I know, it's crazy, isn't it? And you see a couple of big guys sometimes, I'm like, you're like 6'10", but you don't look like you've played a moment of sport in your life. And you're like, if only, like, so that tends to be how I'll go about it. And I might use a couple of crude plyometric movements in there to evaluate asymmetry. That tends to be a really good way for me to do that. Like, I'll get a kid to hop. Let me see how bad you are left to right. And really and I like to hear someone tell me their evaluation of themselves. Like, oh, coach, I don't like, having a cut route that goes, 90 degrees to the left. I don't like that. And I'm like, well, why is that? Let's have a look. And I'm like, oh, you're really bad on your right leg. You can't hop on your right leg. So I can straight away pick those up, bring them together and say, that probably has some form of correlation there. And then if I want to get into the weeds of it, if I want to test how reactive they are, if I want to test how, I don't know, just basic dynamic strength, and then all the way down into, max strength, then we can do that if we need to.
Right.
But it tends to be pretty simple to start with. Like, let me just see how you would move in your sport.
Okay. I wanted to go through, because, we've DM'd back and forth quite a bit. We've talked a bit, and I wish I had my phone on me to pull up the one that you had said something about like we were going to put some content together, and I was like, well, what do you refer to with this? And I watching your stuff, first of all, your content on Instagram is awesome. So everybody needs to follow you on Instagram. Second of all, the way that you set it up, where you'll have exercise, then sometimes next carousel slide over is the education, exercise, education. You're really the first person, at least from my memory, that I saw really talking about the deep tier stuff. But now what I wanted to see is if we could get some type of definition, because you just mentioned hop, almost like, how can we provide a definition for the audience of like, what's a hop in your mind, or how you see it versus a jump? What's like the reactive stuff? What's I can't remember the exact scenario that we were discussing that you had to clarify for me, but those situations, that just so that we're all on the same page as far as like how your brain works and what you sort of put with those definitions.
Yeah. So terminology, I lay it out in exactly the same way that I inherited from my coach, Eric, my mentor, Eric. It's like we have really 4 different movement patterns, but really there's 3. You've got your bilateral, you've got your unilateral bipedal, and your unilateral unipedal. Now, if you don't know what that means in fancy words, is you've got 2-foot movement, you've got 1-foot movement that goes from one leg to the other. And then you've got unilateral unipedal, which is just using one limb. You just use your left. And I'll term that bilateral movements, or 2-foot movements, for me are leaps. A lot of other people call them jumps, and I'm not mad at that. Call that what you want.
Hang on, wait, go back to that, because I was processed. Say that again.
So 2-foot movements, I class as a leap, but you could use the word jump. It kind of can be interchanged for me. And a unilateral bipedal movement, or from one leg to the other, is a bound, and just using one leg is a hop. Now, you can then go to town on where you want to take that. So we have the nouns. That's a noun, right? A squat is a squat, a deadlift is a deadlift. Now I can do those squats and deadlifts in front squat, hack squat, back squat. You have that noun. We've got it. There's no such thing as a single leg hop. No, it's just a hop.
Yep.
So it's really easy then to communicate that. Then where you go with that is you look at maybe amplitude of movement. So in my 3 major tiers that I would say are plyometric, these are reactive elements of movement. You start with what we class as light rudimentary movement. I just class them light tier hops or light tier bounds. You step up into submaximal movement, which we class as medium tier. It's kind of in the middle. Medium tier bounds, medium tier hops, medium tier leaps backwards, laterally. And then the top of the tiers are ping tier. I am aiming to ping off the ground with as much height and reactivity, or as distance or speed. And it is about maximizing that reactive element. And then amongst all of that, our supporting tier, as I kind of class it, which isn't per se plyometric, is the deep tier. So you still can use a deep tier hop or a deep tier leap. You have the same movement patterns, but you now can then place that into the amplitudes of movement or types of movement that you want. So I can do ping tier leaps over hurdles. I can do medium tier bounds laterally. And it always rolls that way, and it's really communicating.
When you say the ping tier, you could say ping tier hop, or you could say ping tier bound, or you could say ping tier leap.
Yep.
Okay. This is great. I love this. All right.
Yeah. So, there's always going to be wishy-washy components to it. Like some of them look a little bit more medium tier. There's maybe in between kind of feeling, but that's fine. Like just for me, if you are an athlete or a coach, you have those categories. Sometimes they might bleed a little bit from light into medium. That's cool. But we use that kind of as like, it's either warming up in a light tier, doing medium tier, high volume work, or real high stimulus ping tier work. And those might be how you structurally put that in your training session. It also could be you want to learn how to ping tier hop. I start with light tier hops, and then I graduate into medium tier hops, and then I'll move into ping tier eventually.
Okay, so I got a question here. Is like, and so you laid out leap, bound, hop.
Yeah.
Then you got into plyometric. Is there anything that is there anything else other than plyometric the way that you would categorize stuff?
Not really. The only other standout bits are like, I'll kind of separate like a drop jump and a depth jump.
Okay.
Everyone calls them a jump, and I'm okay calling that a jump. But again, amongst my athletes, we just call them depth leaps. And the kids go, that's falling off of a box and doing that. Because we just have that language, and it's easy for me to communicate. Like I have had horror stories from coaches that are coaching online, and they're telling their athletes to do hops over hurdles. They mean 2 foot, and the kid thinks it's 1 foot
single. Yep.
Over 3'6" hurdles, and they end up getting hurt.
So tell me here right now, is this something that you would say, I'm listening to you and I have my own definitions. Is it more important that the coach has a clear definition that is communicated to the athlete, or I'm also sitting here being like, damn dude, maybe I should just take what Matt's system is and rearrange the way I communicate, because it's pretty clear. Like, what are your thoughts on that as a coach listening right now? Like,
I just tell people it doesn't really matter what happens outside your ecosystem. What matters is your communication with your athletes and how they're communicating, what comes back to you. Like, I don't care about so-and-so on Instagram. So I tell those coaches that are asking me about this is to have a system and find the easiest way for you to communicate that. So we have a lot of coaches that I work with that slap those definitions up on the wall, and they might just have, like, I'll use it in presentations, but we just put footprints. So it would be like, it just shows you like 2 feet, 2 feet move along. And then the other one is a left foot, right foot, left foot, right foot. And then the other one's just your left foot. And they're like leaps, bounds, hops, done. And then if you've got a few other movements in a leaping pattern, like you can do a split stance and you can do a split exchanging leap. But other than that, that's it. It's still a leaping pattern. It's still bilateral. So that also, another reason why I think it's valuable in my biased opinion is that those movement patterns also have increases in amplitude. So the easiest movement pattern for you to start with is a normal stance leaping pattern, right? Feet are, shoulder width. I increase the intensity of that, or perceived intensity of that, by going to a split stance leap. Why is that? Well, it's a bit more of a narrow base. The front leg might be receiving a bit more force. The back leg might need to be a bit more rigid. We step it up again by going to a split exchanging leap. Why is that more intense? because now we have an increase in limb speed, and limb speed creates a spike in eccentric braking force. So that back leg that comes forward is then being stuffed into the ground and creating a braking force. And then we step into bounds. Why they're obviously more intense because they're on one leg, but a hop is more intense than a bound because the need to continually whip that leg when you hop. So there is an increase in limb velocity again there in comparison to a bound. You can cheat bounds, you can float them and then I'll place my foot down. When you hop, you cannot hide. There is that perpetual need to continually cycle it, which spikes the ground reaction force. So you have leaps, split stance, split exchange, bounds, hops. And I graduate each of my guys we start with light tier leaps, and you might do all 3 leaping patterns, but we might not be doing bounding yet. And you gradually move into bounding and then into hopping. And then we'll go into medium tier leaps. And then we graduate people into medium tier hopping. And you might be doing ping and so on and so forth. Enables me to work with a 70-year-old person and do the most basics of basics. But also I can work with world-class athletes and understand that at certain times I need light tier leaping actions for therapeutic reasons or rhythm.
Yep.
Or we need high stimulating work, but I don't want to really fatigue the lower leg. So we do ping tier leaping patterns because we know that ping tier hopping patterns are horrifically fatiguing neuromuscularly on our lower legs. So we have so many tools to work around a really simplistic system, which is 5 movement patterns and 4 tiers.
5 movement patterns, 4 tiers.
Yep.
5 movement patterns, 4 tiers. I'm just going to... Now, the thing here that I'm thinking, I'm obsessed with... I really like it. So in our system, that what we do is we sort of have these tests, these like trials, essentially, that every 12 to 16 weeks we're testing our athletes. It's a good culture aspect, but it's also like it's a point for an athlete to try and level up, that to move up through the system.
Yep.
Now, we also have other ways that they can sort of level up, because they might just be in the middle of a training block and they're getting stronger, and now all of a sudden they've sort of crossed the barriers that we have established. Do you have numbers or reps or timelines established to go through from, like, leap to bound to hop or whatever that might be, that you, through the intensities, that you typically see, like it takes this many of this exercise to get to this point or this much time, or is it always just straight up individualized?
It is a lot more individualized when it comes to dynamic movement, but nevertheless, you can look at it like this. If you've got a young athlete that's 14 that plays sport, every single athlete should be doing all 5 of those movement patterns in a light tier format. Like, everyone should be able to light tier hop. I don't care what you say, like that. You should. I've not come across a kid that cannot do all of those 5 movement patterns in very small amplitudes. And so when you move into more medium tier stuff, that is where there's going to be a separation. And the separation, it normally comes, I think we can kind of guesstimate that it's about 3 to 4 times body weight on a single leg. A hop in a light tier is a little less. But when you're scaling up to more medium tier stuff, there's a bit of a crossover there. So you have to deal with that, but you have to deal with it instantaneously and then propel yourself off of that. So it's very much understanding what we can handle in the medium tier. So we're all going to be doing light tier stuff. That's in every single dynamic session that we do. We're going to use that in a warm up. We're going to use that to build lower leg capacity, skill patterns, because that's a big thing as well. I don't just graduate my athletes based on how strong and powerful they are. They have to learn how to do the skill, because it is highly skillful to be able to uncoil your leg, time it effectively, have that relax and contract capability there as well, and put it all together and time it effectively. So we normally do undulate, like, voluminous periods where we learn a lot, and then intense periods where we chase higher levels of amplitude, and it goes to and fro. And people would often say, well, that's pretty obvious, but it's I'm not talking the volume being the, whatever capacity driver. I think of it more as the skill dependent driver.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, let's say that you are graduating into medium tier stuff. And I think that it should be a case that most young athletes, let's say you've done 4 weeks of just light tier stuff, and then you get into some speed stuff, you do a sprint session, and you might do some takeoffs. Let's say you're a track athlete. Let's say you're a basketball player. Let's say you're just going to throw down some dunks if you can. Cool. Job done. You go lift. It might be in the coming weeks 5 through 8, you're doing medium tier leaping actions. And I'm not mad at all at anyone trying all 3 of those leaping patterns. Some people might be separated and they might show when you get to split exchange movements that they are a little bit out of control. Normally it's a case that you get a little bit more over rotation because they're like, whoa, that back leg is like stuffing into the ground in front of me and it's creating this over rotating factor. Maybe they just can't produce the pop that they could when their feet are narrow together. And so you might spend weeks 5 through 8 or 9 working on bilateral leaping patterns. And that's not to say that you can't explore ways in which you can also intensify within a medium tier. So I can add in braking forces. So we can do a leaping pattern 2 forwards and then 1 back, and then 2 forwards and then 1 back. So I'm still relaxed in the way that I'm doing it. Like a medium tier, we should be able to have a conversation whilst I'm doing it. But I can add in a little stimulus here and there. And there's a lot of cognitive testing that's happening there. Those neuromuscular patterns are coming in where I can do a braking action in a leaping pattern, but I'm not quite at a stage where I feel comfortable doing those split exchanges or getting into bounding or getting into hopping. So I find ways to try and facilitate what I'm to expect maybe in higher intensity movements. So I think through weeks 9 through 16, you're exploring lots of bounding. Like a bound in a medium tier should be a voluminous period of 3 or 4 weeks where you are mopping up lots of bounds, whether it's forward, laterally, backwards. And then I think maybe weeks 3 and 4, you start to play with hop bound combos. So I go left, left, right, right, left, left, right, right. The step up from that is left, 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 right, right, right. And I'm doing 2 hops into a bound. Or I'm doing 2 bounds into a hop and I'm adding more speed into the hop. So there's all these combos that you can play with, and you'll find out quite quickly that the more hops that you put in could be pretty intense for someone. Or someone could be bounding at a relative speed and then randomly throw in a hop every 4th bound. And that's really fast because you're carrying in the speed that you can handle in a bound. So there's all these ways that you can have fun with and manipulate. And, if you wanted me to lay it all out for you, it would take too long. But it's kind of like, just go play at that point with that. And then I think if you're moving into those, maybe we're talking 16 weeks, 4 months, you've probably got kids that can now hop in the medium tier pretty well.
Right.
And, some kids could do it at week 12. Some kids can do it at week 10. You're just going to have those super freak bouncy kids that have just got it. But you know what? They might not have the capacity to do a group of that volume. So I just say, if you've never done Plyos before, let's just all go through this period. And the beauty of the way that I teach plyometrics in more kind of locomotive, like track and field fashion, is it's self-prescribing in intensity. I don't put you onto an 18-inch box when you're nowhere near going to be able to handle it in comparison to Jimmy, who stood next to me and who bounces out of the gym. But we're still falling from the same height. But however far I bound is the subsequent next landing force that I'm going to receive.
Right.
Whereas if my bounding step is 12 inches shorter than yours, well, I'm going to have less force that I'm going to receive. Same with height. If I jump higher than you, I've got a bigger landing force. So it's this cyclical nature of the better I get at the movement, the higher I jump, the higher the landing force is, the harder the next landing becomes. And it's this continually perpetual thing where you're adapting, learning, and then driving further adaptation.
What's up, guys? Our podcast and our channel are sponsored by our own strength training app, Peak Strength. The entire focus of Peak Strength is to provide you guys with the absolute best sports performance app that you could ever imagine. We build out the programs on the back end. We take in all of these different decisions that we learned here on site at Garage Strength so that we can then apply it to you so you can improve your training. So if you guys want to improve your overall sports performance, head over to peakstrength.app, the Google Play Store or the Apple iOS Store. Download Peak Strength. You'll get a free week of training, and then you can start getting on those gains, get those reps done so that you can become a champion. Now, let's get back to the video. Peace. So you had mentioned like the super freak that could come in and learn pretty quickly, like let's say 8 to 10 weeks in, they're all of a sudden doing medium to ping tier hops. Like what is it like? Have you noticed anything specifically? We just did a podcast with Aaron Gadsden, who's the coach at the Lafon, Olympic champ in the triple jump in Paris. And you know, he mentioned, he's like, dude, she wasn't a freak. She was never an All-American triple jumper in college. But he was like, I just knew she had capability. And I guess the question I had is like, what is it that you see or that you've noticed where it's like you can see someone's just got it? Like they, like, what is it that they have? Like, why is it that they're so much better at jumping? Like we have some kids that'll come in and they'll just, from day one, they're jumping 30 plus inches, which isn't great. But as like a 14-year-old, you're like, how the heck is this kid doing this on a vert? And it's like, he's never even been taught how to jump.
Yeah.
And he clearly has something. Have you noticed anything like that? Like that is there's something that's a clear differentiator?
Normally, I think the standout part that we like visually see with these kids when they actually just do a jump like that is like vertical velocity. You just see them leave the ground with like that like pop, and you're like, oh shit. So like, what creates that pop? Well, it's normally your ability to use your tendons well. That's the component that comes in. Whereas you see, you know, this other kid that's like getting low and slow, and you're like, okay, cool. In 3 or 4 years, when we get you crazy strong, you're going to be right there probably with that kid. But like the kid that's got that twitch like ability, much shorter, shallower drop and pop.
Yep.
And it's this tendon superpower that they've either been gifted very nicely from their parents, or maybe they were just jumping off of crazy stuff when they were a kid and they were, you know, on the top of jungle gyms, jumping off of them. I did a lot of that. I did a lot of learning how I'd climb trees a lot and then not be able to get down. So we did a lot of, oh shit, let's just jump from this branch. And I don't know if that actually helped me, because my parents, they never jumped in their lives. Like my dad played football all of his life, but like, or soccer all of his life, but I never knew that he could jump.
Right.
So like, maybe that was it for me. Maybe I built that capacity by just being an idiot as a child. But
I think you're right, though. I think there is something like my parents have this overhang on a patio, and it's like 10, 11 feet, right?
Yeah.
And we would jump off and see who could, like, and I remember jumping off like 7 or 8 years old and like hitting my chin on my knees.
Yeah.
And the whole thing was like, who could stop themselves and like stick the landing between my brother and I. And we would climb up, we get a Frisbee off the roof, and then we jump off. And it's like, I don't know. We both have pretty good verts for like fatter dudes. So like, I don't know, like maybe you're right, but there's something clear that's like that creates that ability. And as you were talking through this, it's like I had asked about setting up, you know, the progressions and how you think through when they're ready, and you pretty clearly answered that. And I think my next thought on that, especially being admittedly a very lifting centric person, our gym is very lifting centric. Do you see any correlation between one, jumps and lifts, or two, between like lifts at this level or this body weight percentage or this, we'll use a lot of body weight like ratios to jumps to then also speed? Do you see anything along those lines?
I can't say as a Europe, being a coach back in Europe, there is ever much of a focus of that in comparison to what I now see in the US, and it's been really interesting. But I will say, like, going back to like that, like freakishly, like, you know, just that electric ability. When I started as a coach, I mentioned it, like I mentioned to you earlier, that we just had freak athletes, just young, like under 18s. Some of them were jumping 7 feet in the high jump. Some of them were heptathletes, decathletes. They had never weight trained. We used to do 3 track sessions a week. We sprint and we do a lot of plyos and jumps and then technical stuff. When we started to weight train them a couple years later, they were all right up there straight away, like almost 2 times body weight squatting. And you're like, and it just intrigued me. We never did that much like Olympic lifting, probably because I just wasn't confident in coaching it. But I would probably say that they had the pulling ability to probably pull some pretty good numbers. And it always intrigued me to then look at where I start someone when they lift. Obviously, it very much depends on the demographic that you're working with. If I'm working with footballers or I'm working with throwers, it's a different conversation, I think. But it has been interesting since we moved out to the US. And yeah, I don't know if there's necessarily a correlation for everyone. I think that you can bucket a few people. Like if you do have more of a strength dominant guy, in order sometimes for them to hit, let's say, I don't know, close to a 40-inch vert, they need to show, whatever it is, 2 times body weight on a back squat, or they need to show this in an Olympic catch. Whereas other guys don't correlate like that at all. And when they're in heavy lifting periods, they are at their worst in terms of jumping capacity. What's been interesting for me, like just as a personal experience recently, is I have become probably my strongest in the last like 12 to 16 weeks. I'm showing some of my best like counter movement jumps that I've done in a long time at my body weight as well. I was a high jumper, I weighed 165 pounds. I'm now 225 and I'm a athlete. And so, but when I bound, I feel like shit. When I try and hop, I feel terrible. So like the locomotive transfer to the strength numbers and just static counter movement jump ability is so different to reactivity.
Yeah. Do you think it's because the time, like, I guess it would be the impulse is going to be, you would have to be that much higher because of the amount of force. If your time on the ground is the same, the amount of force that you would have to produce in the same amount of time would just be outrageously high because you're heavier.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I want to echo you, is like you had posted the speed hops. So I did the speed hops. This is like a week ago. Right. And I did those, and where did I went to Colombia. So I'm flying to Colombia and I'm like, God, dude, my freaking feet are still sore. And I had gone for a run, like a long run. I was sore for like 4 days from that. I'm like, dude, and I think to echo you is like, it's funny because Gadsden had brought up like lifting, once you get to a certain point, and now women, it's probably later is how he had described it. Cause he also has the #1 guy in the Diamond League right now, Jordan Scott, Jamaican triple jumper. And he's like, for women, that the lifting has a much greater performance enhancer longer. It's longer. But for men, it's more so like the lifting, once they get to a point, and this is specific to triple jump, it becomes more about stability and making sure that they recover from workouts. And it's more of a therapeutic aspect. And I guess that's like one thing that I'm noticing as well is, I don't know, it has like this weird interplay between genders, but then also between events. And even I would assume, you're a high jumper, you need to be super, like, I don't know what Stephen Holmes' numbers were. I was just going to bring up Jonathan Edwards' numbers. And I remember hearing, he could, power clean 140 or 150. And he was just freakishly strong for his, weighing 170 kilos, just basically 70 kilos.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you bring in, a football player, they're going to need to have a bit more max strength because of the time. The time might be a little bit longer when they're making contact with somebody. So it's an interesting way. And I guess that, as I'm saying this, I guess my question for you is like, how do you break that down? as far as someone's needs in the weight room, what are you doing in the weight room, and how are you periodizing the weight room mixed with those hops or mixed with the jumps and stuff? And then even looking at, I did want to go even further. I know this is like a 10-part question. Going further into home, what he did,
Yeah.
maybe even comparing it to the horizontal jumps with Edwards. So I'm going to stop talking because I've got too many thoughts in my head.
I will say, by the way, the points on women and men and stuff is really intriguing. And my mind always draws back to a conversation I had with Eric probably when I was about 3 years into being a high jumper. And I was like, why are we doing this stuff and the girls are doing this stuff? And they were doing so much more sub-maximal volume and we were doing way more high intense hits. And he just said, anecdotally, he said, volume has been so much more critical for tendon development for females. Females cannot develop their tendons at the same rate or in the same way that men do with regards to intensity. I'm guessing that's testosterone based.
Yeah.
And I think that's the same probably with lifting, right? It's your ability to train the muscle to be strong enough to pull on the tendon. And it probably, again, has that relationship with hormones and how over time it's just going to take a lot more to create a more dense structure that can pull harder on a stronger tendon. So yeah, that always stayed in my mind. And I definitely focused out from there to train females in that kind of mindset. So we tend to always do a lot more voluminous sub-maximal work. And I found that it's had a profound effect with plyometrics because when you give them too much high intensity stuff, they break down so much faster than men.
Yep.
That's, again, from my opinion. So in terms of your question, so how things interact. So if we're looking at a track community, for me, what you said about that therapeutic component has been massive for me. It's like, how can I use the weight room to be able to facilitate me doing quality plyometrics and high dynamics? It is not to add another, turbo to my car, right? It is the chassis and the structural stuff that is going to allow me to do the crazy supercharger stuff with plyometrics. And that has become very apparent for me. It's like, well, if I'm going to afford me doing some crazy plyometrics at my age, I have to lift.
Yeah.
Even if it's like right now, every time I do plyometrics, the first thing I do is get on a leg extension machine and just pump out as many reps as I can with 2 or 3 sets. I do the same a little bit with hamstrings and I do the same with my ankles. And it seems to be doing something good. I don't know what it is therapeutically, but I'm like, maybe there's more to this. So that tends to be how I go. And most of the time I'll have a heavy lifting component one time a week, and then we might just do more voluminous, more dynamic lifts. So it's it bridges less of, I'd say it's closer to just doing more dynamic work, but at a slower capacity. So if you're doing like weighted like step ups, and eventually it might come into, dumbbell step ups with a bit of a pop off of the step. And the first session of the week is just going to be slow lifting. Most of the time, my athletes will then do maybe 3 dynamic sessions around that, and I'll tend to merge in plyometrics and speed together. It's just been the way that I've done it in terms of facilities as well. I know some guys will do track stuff and lift after. Mm-hmm. Most of my guys can't do that just in terms of where they're at. There is no track near where they can lift. So we just change it up, different days, time constraints. If I have been able to afford that, it has always been that kind of we'll do track and then we'll lift after. Most of the time it does take away from time on the track though, because everyone's thinking, fuck, I need to go and lift after this. So
right, especially if you're in season, it's like you have no interest in doing that as a track athlete.
Exactly.
I want to see from a high jump perspective. You mentioned, okay, I started playing basketball. Not me, you started playing basketball 17, 18, started high jumping at 18. Mm-hmm. When you were jumping at your best, okay, and maybe this is where we could bring in the home masterclass. Did Home mention like there's a specific pattern or something that he did that when he was doing this, he was at his best? And I'm asking this for you as well, where like, and almost because you had painted like, look, you can see him walking. I've seen him now as an older guy, and he still floats sort of when he walks. Like he's just sort of like on this little bouncy pattern.
Yeah.
Um, and I guess my question is like, I'm always interested where it's like myself personally as a mid-level shot putter, I know what helped me feel good and when I would know I was going to throw far. And I
Yeah.
always like to see like, okay, what are the best of the best? What are they feeling? And that can almost help us as
Mm,
coaches resolve that issue of like, this person's got it, this person does it. And is there some way to
yeah.
unite the mediocrity that you and I have mastered possibly versus the best of the greatest of all time?
Yeah. I'll go with mine, and I never liked it. I was always dismayed because I had an S&C coach at my university, and I had Eric as my track coach, and it correlated perfectly that when I PR'd my back squat, I PR'd in the high jump. the
Yeah.
same the same week. I am a power jumper. I wasn't a speed jumper in the high jump. If you don't know those differences, you're looking at a guy that maybe as a power jumper, they swing their free leg. Their heels might, or sorry, their ankles will come like together at takeoff. Whereas a speed jumper, his free leg is coming underneath his butt, and it's kind of like a sprinting action over that takeoff leg. It often correlates in slightly faster times on the ground, but big like hip flexor dominant feeling to my jump, and it correlated to. So what would it be? So 165 was my back squat at 70 kg. So just over 2 times bodyweight squat. That's about where I pushed it in terms of where my back enjoyed that. When you weigh 70 kilos, trying to put heavy loads on your back, I don't think. And I'm fortunately long torsoed rather than I am long legged. So that correlated for me, which to my dismay, my PB was indoors. Figure this one out. I hadn't high jumped since the previous August, and I was running my approach to a basketball hoop on an indoor basketball court because we didn't have indoor facilities. And in the UK, it is just pissing rain and cold up until April. So we ran to a basketball hoop, and I would just run up and headbutt basketball rims as my approach.
That was your training.
That was my high. That was my specific high jump training.
Right.
So that's, when I told you I was a mediocre high jumper and technically poor. That's what.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You're not getting any reps in.
We trained from March in the high jump, really.
Right.
End of March if we got good weather. So
yeah. How would you PR indoors then?
Great question. I think it's to do with the feeling of we just did so many reps of just running the approach and not thinking about the technical elements and just thinking about the output elements. I'm like, I want to get my shoulder to hit the rim. Like that was whereas visually when you're looking at a bar, you're always trying to figure out in your mind, like where you need to be. It's like, so I teach my high jumpers, don't clear the bar. You're to jump as high as you can every time and let the bar come underneath you. And like, that's been like my outlook ever since that. So I think that was it. I just ran tons of them and I felt good running those. I didn't have to worry about a bar falling off. I just punched it through the roof. And when I got to indoors, that's what I did. I just ran and jumped.
Yeah.
Just really simple that is. But yeah, going back to Stefan's stuff, I don't want to get it wrong, but I feel like I remember him saying, this is 2012 when we had this masterclass. So Stefan, if you're listening, let's hope he is listening. I'm pretty sure that he said hang power clean is at its best and home hurdles are flowing well. Technical, I can't remember if there was any points technically, but those, and I don't know if you've ever seen the Price of Gold documentary from the Swedish organization in 2000, and
No.
you I'm going to send you it after. It's
Okay.
phenomenal. It is a train wreck in terms of what they did to their bodies to like lose weight, to the injuries in it is horrific. But I know that Stefan did a lot in terms of, those high jumpers were dropping significant weight coming into season, which also
That's
scarred.
why he was so. I mean, he was notorious. He was super inconsistent in his career. I mean, he's an Olympic champ, but he also had other meets and other Olympics where it was like
Yeah,
he went in and just didn't do well at all, probably because of this.
yeah, yeah. So it is fascinating. It really is. So yeah, 2008 Olympics, he should have won. From 2004, he won the Olympics. 2005, he jumped 240 indoors, won the European indoor champs. I think he won the world indoor champs the year after. And it was just like, won the European outdoor champs. 2008, just absolutely, it was a disaster. And I think he retired after that, right? 2009, that was it and done.
So this, I'm gonna date myself here a little. What my best friend growing up was a high jumper, state champ the year that I won states in track, and he ended up he jumped at Harvard, and when he was getting recruited by Princeton, American high jumper was there. And it's interesting you mentioned this hang power cleans. It was Tora Harris, and he's like a 7'7" guy, like 232, I think.
Yeah.
And Adam had taken his visit, and I remember, he comes back. He's like, Tora Harris was hang power cleaning 285 pounds for 3. And it's like, yeah, the guy was a rail.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because it's like, why is that? And I've even, been at the Olympics where you're in the village and you're walking around, and it's like, there's something with that lift, with step ups, with that.
Yeah.
It's always those, and then super partial quarter squats that you see high jumpers, triple jumpers. And it makes me think too, like in the realm of performance with football and with maybe even soccer in the US, should we be doing more of that? Or do you think it's just so specific to those athletes? That was another weird question I had for you.
So I really like those elements, and they're hated, but I think it displays the shorter times of impulse for those athletes. But those guys aren't going to be pulling off the ground. They're not going to like the first pull. They're not even going to like the second pull. Like they want to rip it and get under it. And that to them is that sensation, the same sensation of a heavy step up. It's boom. It's that pop at the top of extension patterns, which is all they get into. And they're all doing deep squat patterns, or they're all on a leg press, maybe doing some leg extensions. My mind also reflects to this as well. And I think that sometimes when we look at these components of training, we're like, whenever they're lifting the hang cleans heavy, or they're doing it, whatever they deem as well, maybe they're measuring bar speed, maybe they're just measuring overall weight and what they're catching. Is it just that they're doing that well at the right point in the season, and they are expressing what they're getting right everywhere else, that then is expressed into that lift and that little punch of their hips that expresses that? They're getting stronger in their rate of eccentric rate of development, and they're able to catch it better. Is that, it's like, what is displaying this or expressing it, and what is developing that at that point?
Yeah. Is it
intrigued me?
So you're saying, like, basically, is it the hang power clean that's helping them express a big jump? Or is it just the fact that, dude, they're already setting up everything in their entire year for this moment, so of course this is going to be dialed in, and then mentally these athletes are like, yo, we're already, like, they don't realize it, but everything's lined up, and they feel like they've got to do that hang power clean to hit it, but in all reality, everything's lining up for them to feel that. But it's already, the work's already been done.
Yeah. Someone big with that is Greg Rutherford. Great example.
Yeah.
If I'm running fast, and he just power cleans off the floor. If he's power cleaning 150, it's like, over, I'll jump 820. And the psychological mindset that he's got, if that's dialed in with his speed and his hang power clean, you're not going to beat him. And that's why he was so successful, I think. And that's what Dan Pfaff did unbelievably well with him. When he came into the UK in 2010, getting ready for the London Olympics, is Greg was so injured because he was training 6 days a week. Dan came in and made him train 3 days, 4 days a week max. And he controlled and harnessed this unbelievable talent and just made him feel better for most of the week rather than like he'd been ran over. And yeah, just dialed in.
And then he has better technical work, so he feels better.
The outputs are higher. He feels better.
Runway works better. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't want to go too far down the track route because I could end up being down there for the next like 6 years, and I just will roll and roll and roll. And like, my wife always gets mad because she's like, yeah, when you start talking to people about track, it's just like I just go on and on and on. Like I wanted to share this real quick. He's like, I've been there at World Champs. I've seen Yulimar Rojas from Venezuela back squatting like 600 pounds, like short, like the short stuff to a box, and she'll rack it. Dude, she's just larger than life, like literally larger than life because she's so big. But then also just like dances, slams the rack in, starts running her mouth, talking trash, and then might do like single leg bounds or something after that. I have never been able to fully understand her training because she's just sort of it's a lot of random work. But I guess where I'm going with that is how much, like, you take somebody like a triple jumper or a long jumper and take this as a high jumper as well, and your background's in high jump. How much of this stuff can we use then if you're setting up a week and you have a wide receiver, you have a tight end, you have a defensive end? How is the week set up to be able to increase that ability so that, let's say, a D ends in a 3-point, he's coming off the end, and we need to get their vert or their, whatever else you might be measuring from a unilateral position. How would you set that up to improve that so that their field play is that much twitchier as well?
I think you just, like, I've always looked at, it could be just routes that this person's running or they're effective at or not effective at, and deeming it like a triple jump workout, right? Like, this is your hop. It is that hard deceleration off of X amount of strides. And it's like, can I use drills that would enhance that? Well, what's going to enhance that? Well, it's going to require me to do a form of decelerating pattern, whatever that is. Someone that does some wild stuff was Teddy Tango. I don't know if you've ever seen him with 300 kilos in his back, and he takes a lunging step forward, breaks, and then pushes himself back. Does it in like a squat rack. I've never seen anyone else do it, but I'm like, if Teddy did it, I'm kind of intrigued by it. So it's like,
yeah, I don't know if I've ever seen that.
I need to show you it. I'll send you it.
Okay.
So okay. That's kind of how I look at it. I look at, especially in football, because football is kind of, the wide positions in football is kind of, there is a track element to it where when we take away the ball, we take away the technical side of the sport that has that ball and interaction with an opponent. But if you're just trying to run a route, right, you become a track athlete. You've got to do certain things, execute things at really high velocities. Obviously, there's a moment when the ball gets involved and defenders come in, but a big part of your job is to be physically capable of doing that. So I don't think those things massively change for me. I just always look to manipulate, like, how can I add overload into your ability to decelerate or cut or run a curved route or whatever it looks like in terms of decelerating, max speed, acceleration capacity. It doesn't change that dramatically. For someone like a triple jumper, I'm not going to be doing loads of like medium tier work or ping tier work because their sport is ping tier and it is the purest form of it. But I can use those movements with a wide receiver, for example. And that is like their form of triple jump. And we can manipulate some of those elements to feel like we're really spiking, like braking control, eccentric rate of force development. We can look at their isometric capabilities as well, being able to get in and out of a very hard cut. And it doesn't change dramatically for me. Like, I still want them to have that kind of, like, you watch that old Russian high jump video where they're all doing lots of locomotive work like that. I just bring in more of a multi-directional focus to it.
Yeah.
And keep speed and max velocity stuff in there.
So do you, do you set up, like, let's say if you would have a lineman, like somebody who plays
Mm,
American football down in the trenches, would they do more deep tier stuff? And would it be fair to say if we would do deep tier, is it would we do deep tier medium level
mm,
work because they are typically going to have that hip height, might be like we need to get them comfortable and twitchy
yeah.
from that position.
Yeah, like I always tend to play like like I have bandwidths around. So let's say that you move within like 6 inches of your hips being a certain height. Well, I'll try to work like 5 to 6 inches above that and 5 to 6 inches below that if that's possible. And I want to get you good down here, and I do want to get you good in a good tall position as well, just in case
Because you'll be
stick
there.
up.
Yeah.
But ultimately, yeah, I want to instill not just heavy overloads at slow speeds in there to improve your strength, but I want to deep tier's most effective component is velocity as the form of overload in deeper ranges of motion. And that's like a hidden superpower for me in
Say that
terms
again. Velocity, deep
of
tiers.
velocity becomes the overload component at deep ranges. So similar to sprinting at high speed, right? The faster I run, the higher overload I get. It can be the same. We can use gravity to instill that really hard eccentric decelerating capacity. And that was something that I learned. So I did my first like NFL combine prep with a group here in Tennessee. And we had 15 offensive linemen and a few tight ends. And we used deep tier movements, and I was shocked at how bad they were eccentrically controlling force of just their own body weights into deep positions. And I was like, this is a freaking superpower for you, man. Like, I know that a lot of your job is just to explode concentrically, but if you've got to control someone that's forcing you back into deep positions and uncomfortable positions, like, shit, that's a lot.
Right.
So it really showed me, and I'm working with 300-pound plus guys, and I get why it would be difficult, right? It's a hell of a different equation for me that weighs 200 pounds when you weigh
But
over,
you also know they're the best, like some of the best athletes on the planet.
but you're also doing that. So what we saw that almost correlated really well is the guys that ran and jumped the best also displayed anecdotally what I just looked at is, well, you guys were better at deep tier stuff. I think, you could bring up umpteen amount of other tests and say that correlated with that, but like the deep tier also was a tick box for me. I'm like, oh, you're going to struggle with this.
Right.
And it was pretty straightforward in
Would
terms
you
of
see too then, like let's say if I mean I'll have guys come in, football guys, shot putters, and it's like they get to 90 degrees and they just fold. Everything, they die.
mm-hmm.
My initial analysis is almost always, I've only been playing around with these movements since I've been stalking you on Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
But basically now it's like, okay, if I see these guys come in, if they are dying on a front squat or a back squat, or oftentimes I wanted to bring this up, we go real heavy single leg squats, real foot elevated. We'll go
Yeah.
like last week we had four D2 football guys that are solid, single leg squat over 182 kilos. And it's like two of those kids, when they came in, they couldn't even keep their foot on the pad. So then when we're doing some split deep tier work in the beginning, they were dying. Like this is going back 6-7 months ago now.
Yeah.
And I almost have seen something similar. I wanted to bring that up because it's something that I've learned from you where it's like, dude, I do agree with you. Like it's almost in the velocity of it with that position, it's almost like a cheat code for their brain to learn. Like it's okay to be down here. It's okay to be at high speed down here as well.
Exactly. And that's been a massive teaching component for me in terms of like that inhibitory response of being like, holy shit, I'm taking this tissue through really deep ranges, but at speed. But on the flip side of it, once you break down that inhibition, and like if you're not using deep tier with someone that's been injured, if you've had an ACL injury, if you've had knee issues, if you've had hamstring issues, you need to do some deep tier and get that tissue at range and get it past that point of being inhibited, being like, fuck, I don't want to put my back knee down. I don't want to highly bend at the knee or fold at the hip. And it will get to a point where they start to use the tissue reflexively at the deepest parts of those movements. And I mean, I've had it with my buddy Chris Speed. He was the first one that was like, I'm taking this and putting it in Olympic lifting. Like, primarily what he coaches is Olympic weightlifters. And he's like, the bounce capacity out of, like, if I catch deep clean, I can just bounce out of it because I've got that ability to reflexively stand up out of it rather than being like, oh shit, I'm in this hole and it's a whole other.
Yeah, you've trained it. You've trained it now in a different. It's funny because I was just talking with a German biomechanist about this and about how really weird technical skills can be learned by actually veering off pretty substantially off of the skill. So, like, let's say a thrower, instead of doing a traditional spin, could do like 3 extra spins and then try and throw, and they might do that as one day of training. And honestly, when I was talking to him about it, it's like he was sending me some of these studies. I actually think that's one huge benefit of the deep tier stuff with weightlifting is that you will train it slightly differently, and it is a reflection of reflexive movement then for the weightlifter to get more comfortable and to have more intent coming out of that bottom position at a higher speed. And it is a really, really unique thing that I think also at the same time, I've had people have some knee issues that it's like all of a sudden now they start to move, they start to use their tissues a little bit more effectively. So some of the inflammation goes away because now they're getting more comfortable in that position.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, like if I look at some of the best Olympic lifters, and I'm no expert at all in the Olympic weightlifting, but when I look at like a full clean and I'm catching it at the bottom, you see so much moments of relaxation as I come in to catch at the bottom of this, right? I'm getting under the bar to catch it, and it takes for me to be relaxed.
Yep.
So what that tells me is that movement for the best lifters is a yielding action of force at the bottom of that catch, rather than poor lifters that catch the bar almost high and then try to overcome
down. Yeah. Yes. 100%.
They're overcoming the force rather than yielding the force. So you can't pull on a bar, so overcome force, catch it at the top, overcome that force downwards and fight it, and then stand up and fight it. There's diminishing return to that so quickly. Like it needs to be overcome, yield, and overcome as you stand up then. And that's deep tier. I relax in the air, I drop and catch deep in a more relaxed format.
I almost think what you just said there might be like the best part of what like the simplest way to sum up what we're talking about. And I do have, first of all, I want to say, Matt, I wanted to talk to you about some of your athletic career to get through your coaching to how you ended up in Tennessee. And that did not happen at all, but I want to get into, I have 2 other questions.
Yeah.
But first,
you're good.
When you mentioned yielding the force, first of all, I felt like you were Yoda speaking to me, but second of all, I actually think like can you just go through this as far as like your different jumps? Okay. Mm-hmm. And the way that you just said it, as far as like a weightlifter, it's easy for me to think that, but then thinking about yielding, let's say, as you're doing let's say a ping tier hop, like the speed hops that you posted. Yeah. How would you say yielding the force in something like that happens so quickly?
Well, every movement that we do, there's no separation of yielding and overcoming when it comes to a human, because we can't, like, the word stiffness has destroyed our industry, in that we assume that you have to overcome every bit of flexion and deformation in a movement. No, you have to yield somewhat to get the tissue to actually give you what it needs. So in a hop for speed, like the video of this guy is insanity, right? By the way, like 30 meters of hopping, and the time is phenomenal. And he runs 20 yards and then hop on one leg. He's literally sprinting on one leg. the yielding of that is tiny, but it still has to happen. It's like the idea that every dynamic movement has an isometric component to it. It has to have it.
Yeah.
We can't move without having an isometric component. Now, we want to minimize that. So that's exactly what we're doing with the yield, right? We are minimizing the isometric component to it. So you have to have a little bit of softness to what you're doing. And I say softness, it could be the tiniest amount of flexion. But when we compare it to moving an external stimulus like an Olympic bar, like the best thing that I can do is probably catch it in some of the deepest positions, because my front squat capacity is going to be way higher than what I can clean, right? I would assume so. As someone that's a complete moron to Olympic weightlifting, I would assume my front squat's heavier than my clean.
Should be, yes. If you don't suck.
If you don't suck, exactly. But really, once I can get comfortable to yield that bar into the deepest position possible. Now, I don't want to yield it for long, so obviously I'm going to catch it
got to be
in position. Yeah. But I yield it enough at that deep position to then stand up out of it. So I have that little bit of compression and reflexive nature at the bottom of that movement, so then I can just press up through that and then start to overcome again.
So, yeah, it's interesting because it's like you see in bar path work and weightlifting, you would see, and I want to relate this to somebody sprinting in the speed hops video. You'll see an athlete as they get longer and longer through their career, a weightlifter, their height that they pull to might get slightly diminished over time because they are getting better at yielding the weight.
Yeah.
And so they might not even get stronger in some sense, but the technique improves, so then they can yield better in a better position. And it's a longer representation, what you're describing, because if you teach somebody how to clean who's a younger kid, they'll catch and then they go down.
Yeah.
But the sooner they start to yield that, they start doing box jumps where they can touch and go, and then they can start to do repetitive hops, and they start to, repetitive double leg bounds. I know that's not your term, but for the audience, and it's interesting because that representation is easier to see than someone doing a speed hop or someone doing something at a much faster pace. And I like how you describe that. The stiffness term isn't really, because then you're almost too rigid. You're almost landing like locked knees and you're not yielding anything.
No, you're not. And I think the worst component of this, there was just a big era from like 2010 to 2015 where a lot of these things like pogo leaps, pogo hops came in, and everything was about reactive strength index, because that had kind of been created, and we'd all started to get jump mats and VBT, and everyone's like, let's maximize RSI. And I'm like, personally, just doing the stiffest thing that you possibly can is probably not going to, pardon the pun, but yield the best results.
Yeah.
You need to maximize your jump height whilst either getting to a very short contact time or staying in that same contact time and increasing jump height. So let's say that you're doing a 2 foot, leap on the spot for as much height as possible. It's no good you trying to do it as fast as you can, because then you're going to lose jump height. Your job is to come as high as you can within a threshold. And that for me is like, that's a much better way to look at it, because you will see, today for some reason, I was like, I'm going to go in depth jump today. I haven't depth jumped since like 2014. And I fell off what did I fall off? 120. Yeah. 1 meter 20 was 48 inches.
Yeah.
And I calculated at the time I spent 0.48 of a second on the floor. So it was half a second, but I jumped 35.8 inches. So like, in order for me to handle that eccentric force, in order for me to produce that propulsion, I've got to spend longer on the ground.
Yeah.
I can't do it stiff. It's not going to happen. Right.
Yeah.
So the higher I lift the box, the less I'm going to be able to be reactive and fast and create propulsion. So too many people are dancing and like, oh, nice and stiff. And I'm like, cool, try and bound for distance, try and hop for distance, and tell me how much more of a different thing that is. You're going to spend more time on the ground, and that's fine, but you have to maximize output and propulsion before you can chase the stiffness component.
Right. Okay. I wanted to ask these last two questions because I think you explain, at least I hope that you explain it for the audience, because I like, especially the way you describe the depth drop, I think is a good comparison towards the weightlifting movement, and then hopefully it helps paint that picture for somebody with higher speed. Now, is there any specific plyos or movements that you see? You mentioned working with the NFL guys. You mentioned working with the combine prep, and that you might see like these specific movements really carry over well to acceleration work. These movements carry over really well to max speed work. Is and I don't know if this is accurate. Those speed hops to me, maybe a little bit of both, but I even see that as possibly max speed. The speed hops transferring over to max speed. One thing I wanted to bring up is some of our guys, we were trying it, last week, 2 weeks ago, and the switching ability was lagging, and then their rhythm started to come through, and it was like, holy shit, now these guys are getting it. And I wanted to see, like, is there a couple, 2, 3, 4 plyos that you work to clearly improve acceleration and then clearly improve max velocity?
Yeah. So again, it becomes that component of like, so I look at it in two ways. I look at utility of momentum, so utilizing momentum and creating momentum. Creating momentum is an acceleration. Utility of momentum is max velocity. And I think that it's obvious. A lot of people are doing it. There's a correlation between people that can accelerate well and the people that can broad jump well, right? That they probably can do both of those. But and very much gone down that same pathway when we look at the vertical stiffness and compare it with max velocity sprinting. Now, my opinion goes far more, again, biased, but I think it goes way deeper in terms of what you just mentioned. Number one was the switching ability for max velocity running, right? When you hop for speed, I don't necessarily think about it in terms of switching. I look at it in terms of negative foot speed and retraction of leg.
Okay.
So I look at it in those two different elements. How fast and how uninhibited am I to whip my leg down into the ground and pivot myself forward? And then how confident am I in retracting the leg off of the ground and ripping it through to get it back out in front of me to do that same job again? And hopping at speed, I think that there's some research back in maybe the 90s where they looked at the difference between a hop and a bound. And I think a hop has twice the amount of hamstring loading that the bounding had. In terms of, I think it was EMG data that they took. And it makes sense. I have to rip that foot into the ground. And you would have experienced it, right? It is just, you are cycling your legs so fast to manage that. And that correlation makes a lot of sense for me in terms of that transferring over to max velocity sprinting. Now, it does always have this thought, though, that a lot of my guys that are fast in max velocities, in flying tens, can hop fast. But in order to get to those points where they run what I deem as fast, so let's say you're running 21 miles an hour plus, obviously we had to get you there. And most of these kids wouldn't have been able to do hops for speed to get me to that point. So I like using a speed bound, which is a really good movement, and that often correlates pretty well. It is literally just bounding. And what's different between a speed bound and running in max velocity? Max velocity is a cyclical action where I pick my feet up. A bound for speed is still a swinging leg. It's coming in like a U shape in terms of the foot pathway rather than picked up under the arse and then brought back down. So it's a great one to use, but also doing that in training where you're carrying velocity in. So I'll do a flying version of that. It's the same with those speed hops. And it's what a lot of people ignore constantly is it's like, oh yeah, I do my hopping and I do my bounding. And I'm like, cool. how much of this do you think actually translates? Because the first 5 to 10 that you do are getting you going. They are creating momentum. We want to test your hamstring's braking capacity. And in order to do that, we need 15 to 20 meters to get you going. And then it's about how fast that posterior tissue is being loaded and how well you can handle that, or whether you just collapse and bail out of that. So those are two really valuable components. Everyone will talk about an RSI bilaterally on the spot. Single leg RSI on the spot is it will tell you so much more information personally. I always want to see that asymmetries are less than 10% from right to left. That is going to do a lot for rhythm, number one, because a lot of people can improve their max velocity sprinting if they're just smoother. You can do a hell of a lot in coaching someone, and it kind of pains me as a track coach to be like told that, oh no, you don't need to coach it. It just needs to be, whether you use a constraint or not. Like if I can make someone smoother, great. Asymmetry is often a great way to make someone smoother, is to iron out that asymmetry. So more than 10% is too much of a discrepancy for me. So I want to work on that. I'll do more hopping. You can do a single leg RSI test just on a plyomat or using a VBT device or whatever. And then creating momentum. Rich Burnett, the owner of Plyomet, actually came up with a test which is really cool called the max RSI test. You stand off of the mat. You can use between anything from like a couple inches to like a foot. And what you do is you do like a tiny little leap or jump onto the mat, and then you punch it for as much height as possible. So what you're trying to do there is create an element of reactivity. And I do this on a single leg now, and I think this is starting to correlate even stronger to accelerations, because a big component of accelerating is your foot's stiffness and rigidity as you pivot over it. We see it in a lot of novice athletes that when they retract their foot down and kind of backwards so that they can progress forward, we see a collapse in the ankle. We see that real soft position. That dictates the shin to be more vertical, and they stand up really early. And that's why they can't maintain good acceleration mechanics. You could argue that speed is also an element of that, but it's kind of like chicken or the egg, right? If I can get you in a better position, we can move faster off of it, and we can create more speed, and so on and so forth. So I can create that reactive and stiff element with that movement, and it's really valuable because it is quite hard to do that. Like again, hopping is also a great movement to use. Right. So I use resisted hopping. Put a band around someone's someone's torso, and I almost don't let them move, and they just hop, bang, bang, bang,
Dude,
bang.
This is the thing. I was playing around with the speed hops, and Legend, who does all of our speed stuff here, he's like looking at me, and he's like, "Yo, we should do that with the band. We should do it with the 1080. If we did it with the 1080, we could get a very precise resistance and set the distance, and then have times. And now we just turn that into a more competitive thing for athletes." I'm like, "Yeah,
yep. I've got a whole layout of the resisted versions of it, and people like a bound resisted, and I do like resisted bounds, but resisted hopping, man. If you want that stiffness element of like an acceleration mechanic where that foot is being retracted so fast down into the ground, and you've got to resist that deformation of that ankle dropping and pivot your body weight over it to continue the translation of your shin in that position rather than losing it. Hopping is phenomenal for that. It's so good. So I start athletes with a super heavy resistance and almost make it immovable and say, right, attack, bang, bang, bang. And you almost see this it is like hammering a nail down into the ground. It's like stiff. And then over time, it's about allowing that freedom of, right, now you've got the weight of your body weight that's going to be out in front of you. And now you've got to deal with a slightly different component of where your center of mass is and still create that stiffness. So we just bring down that resistance, which probably is going to bring down how fast they want to retract the foot at first, but we just gradually tease that in. It's like, cool, you lost a little bit of leg speed into the floor because we took away that resistance. So we gradually just allow this learning period, then we drop the resistance, learning period, and then you just see that overall accelerating velocity starts to increase over time because you're allowing it, and then hopefully you're continually seeing that aggressive strike into the floor to continually push them down the track or field or whatever. So
Right.
that's really valuable. So the creating momentum with the max RSI is a great one. I want to play with a broad jump version of it because I do have some ideas with that. That and resisted hops.
I think just the way you describe that, like looking at max velocity is utilizing momentum, and then looking at acceleration truly through the simple lens of like creating momentum it's so simple that way to think through it. And it's like thinking then like, okay, what exercises can help with which portion of that
Yeah.
is the way to go.
Yeah. Yeah. You want to get better at accelerating? Get into a deep position of a pin squat and stand up with it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It's funny. All right, Matt, I want you to plug, you're coming out. I saw you're coming out with a product, or you just released a product, right?
So sorry, say that again?
The jump stuff that I swear I saw you posting this on Instagram.
We actually have a plyometric intensive course that is a new cohort's about to run in September.
Okay.
We have an introduction to coaching plyometrics course as well, which has been really successful. We've had almost 1,300 coaches and physical therapists take that course now.
Oh yeah, that's freaking awesome.
Yeah, it's been amazing. It's been amazing. I've just been, I just create something and I was like, holy shit, people really like this. Yeah. and then we have our Plus Plyos subscription program, which is like Netflix with plyometrics. You come on it and you just go to town, and you can go in any sport, in season, off season, 2-day, 3-day, 4-day splits. And now we're starting to integrate. I'm trying to bring the whole program to it. I want to bring sprinting, I want to bring lifting in, I want to bring plyos and the whole shebang for it. So we've got those elements. We've got return to dynamic movement program, which is like basically you've done all the clinical rehab and now you're a PT or you're an athlete and you have no idea how to bridge doing band work with your hips, and now you want to actually hop or you want to sprint. Like, what do I do in between? And we built a program specifically for that bit.
And where can people find that?
Plusplyos.com, or you can find me on Instagram, which is McInnes Watson.
All right, Matt, thank you for being on here, and we'll plug that in the show description in the description on YouTube so people can click on that link as well. Thanks for coming on, and thank you for. The only problem here is I got to put this stuff into ChatGPT and then organize my notes. So thank you for helping me. Thank you for making me do more work to learn so much. And now I'm going home and I'm thinking, damn it, do I need to change the way I speak to the athletes about some of these hops and jumps?
Hey, just put the terminology up on the wall, and then just you have that little reflection. Both of you could be like,
yeah,
do the hops, and they're like, what's a hop?
They're like, oh shit, it's this.
And
absolutely.
Then 2 months in, we're hopping for speed. Everyone just starts hopping for speed.
It's so normal. Yep. All right, Matt. Thank you.
Appreciate it, Dane. Love your work.
Peace.